Hi, welcome to the Integration Talks. I'm Francis, I will be your host today. Integration Talks is about everything around system integrations. And then we both speak about internal integration as cross-company integrations. And it's not only about technology, but also processes, how-tos, good practices to get an integration project up and running. Yeah. And today we are welcoming Claire, Claire Agutter. I hope I got your name good.
You did, yeah.
Agutter. And today we are going to talk about SIAM, and that will be our focus. But before we dive into the detail, Claire, can you tell a bit about your background, about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for inviting me onto the podcast. So like you said, my name's Claire. I'm based in the UK and my entire career really has been service management. So more than 20 years now, which is quite frightening when I think about it like that. But I started working on service desks in end user support and then took some early ITIL qualifications. So it was ITIL V2 when I was doing my training. And from there, I felt like I'd found my home. So progressed through into change management roles, general service management adoption roles, consultancy, training. And for the last 13 years, I've been the director at ITSM Zone, which is an e-learning business for service management. And then 4 years ago as well, started Scopism, which is kind of more focused on content. You know, it's very obvious looking at the service management market that things are changing very quickly. There's lots of new ways of working, new procedures, new practices coming through. So Scopism's kind of more aimed at that side of the market. We provide content, consultancy, we run conferences, and that was where we kind of worked on the service integration and management body of knowledge that lives under the Scopism brand.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's the acronym is SIAM is Services Integration and Management. I've seen you joined Bloor Research.
Yes.
Recently. What's Navigator?
So Blur Research is an analyst company based in the UK, strong focus on technology, but also the kind of the future of work, and it's the future of work practice that I sit within. Okay. What Blur are trying to do with the navigators is kind of reach out to people who they can see are doing work in a particular space and asking them to bring in their industry expertise. So it sounds, I'm trying to say this in a way that doesn't make me sound massively big-headed, but they'd kind of seen some of the work that we've been doing with the content creation. They'd seen me present at a couple of events. So as part of that future of work practice, I get to work with the other Blur analysts who are all fabulously intelligent people. Just speaking to them is an education. And we're kind of creating content to support organizations, because one of the massive things about the COVID pandemic has been the impact on organizational structure and how people work. You know, everything got broken, all of our normal patterns, nothing's the same. And a big concern for me is we don't just go back to how it was before. You know, let's not just blindly try and put everything back together. Let's kind of think about how do we build the flexible workplaces of the future. And of course, technology is a massive supporting piece of that.
Absolutely. Exactly. We just had a meeting on when we are reopening the offices, what are we going to do? How are we going to work? Yeah. So it's a hot topic.
It is, and it's not a binary decision, and that's it. Kind of, you know, it was everybody out of the office, and then certainly in the UK we opened back up again, and there was this big kind of right, everybody back into the office, and of course, different things suit different people. I mean, I'm sat here in my little garden office. I've worked from home for more than 10 years and I absolutely love it. It's perfect for me. But there's other people who would think that this is a horrific environment. So, you know, how do companies build a flexible environment that caters to the people who want to be in office, the ones who want to be at home, the ones who want a little bit of both. It doesn't just have to be one rigid way of working for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think it's worthwhile to do another podcast on this one. But okay, let's now, because what I understood from your background, you have a lot of knowledge on this SIAM, the Services Integration and Management. Is it a framework? What is it exactly?
We call it a methodology, but to be honest, that was one of those it's one of those things that we spent way too long on as an author group, because when we wrote the SIAM body of knowledge, we had this big group of authors from all over the world, and we were trying to reach consensus in a lot of areas. And the initial discussion is always, is this a framework, a standard? Is it good practice, best practice? We settled on methodology. Really, it's kind of a non-prescriptive collection of guidance that reflects how organizations all over the world are working in a multi-supplier environment, because really that's all SIAM is. It's an approach to managing the complex supply chains that we all have now. So for example, my e-learning business is a teeny tiny business. We're not big at all, but everything is outsourced. Web development, course production, voiceover, tutor support, help desk, account management, everything. That's not even getting into all the different bits of software that we use to create and host our courses. So it's a really complex supply chain, and blow that up to something the size of a UK government contract. So for example, I worked at the National Health Service when they were bringing in their SIAM model. Expand it to that size, everything's massive. The suppliers are massive, the contracts are massive, the costs are massive. And certainly I think for IT people, we will all recognize this scenario that something's gone wrong, and you speak to the application supplier, and the application supplier goes, no, definitely not the application. It must be the database. Yeah. So you go chat to the database provider and they say, oh, no. It's probably the network. And the network provider says, no, that sounds like an application fault to me. And you end up going round in circles because all of your suppliers are focused on their contract, their piece of the jigsaw, and they're not seeing the big picture. And what SIAM's doing is just saying, bring in a service integrator. And depending on your size, that can be a person, a team, you can outsource it, you can do it yourself, but have an area of the organization, have a logical area that is responsible for building a culture of collaboration, looking at the end-to-end service, looking at the big picture. And the more you can get your suppliers working together, the more value you're going to see from the money that you're spending.
Okay, so is SIAM then helping or providing practices to draft the contracts and the way that the service providers have to cooperate, or how does that work?
In a perfect world, you will have your service integrator involved quite early on in the process as you are choosing your service provider, because the elements of the SIAM ecosystem are the customer organization. So that could, for example, be the National Health Service here in the UK, the service integrator. And for the NHS, that was provided by internal staff. And then all of your suppliers. So we had, Accenture, Fujitsu, CSC. So the perfect situation is the service integrator is already in place and is there very early in those conversations. And quite often that's why companies choose to work with an external service integrator, because they want that guidance about the contracts. In the real world, quite often what you're trying to do is bring SIAM into an environment where you've already got quite a lot of contracts and some of them can't be changed. But really that's where the culture of SIAM comes into place, because a lot of SIAM is about building this culture of collaboration. How do you encourage all of your service providers to work together? How do you encourage them to focus on improvement rather than their own targets. So ideally, we're setting things up in a perfect world, but quite often it's more about making do with what's already in place.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So the is there something like a SIAM certified stamp? Something that because I'm a vendor and I'm a SIAM certified organization. Is that the case?
No, there isn't. There's a SIAM certification scheme for individuals. So some of the big service providers in the SIAM space choose to have their staff certified either to foundation or professional level.
Mm-hmm.
There isn't anything at the organization level. I suspect, I mean, in a way, I think it's because nobody's considered doing that. But I also suspect because it's so different. Each SIAM ecosystem is so different. Each provider who's involved with it is so different. It's for me, I would think the value would come more from the certification of the individuals within the organization, because it is so heavily focused towards culture and collaboration.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I did also read one of the benefits of having a system integration layer between the company and the different vendors is that you also have the right infrastructure, if I can call it like this, in place to replace some system vendors and or to work for the same use case with multiple system vendors.
Yeah, one of the real benefits of SIAM should be this ease of onboarding and offboarding service providers within the ecosystem. So I'm working at the moment with a client in the US. We're doing some SIAM consultancy with them. Mm-hmm. They're moving from one big managed service provider to a big network of individual service providers. But basically what they're saying is, from our customers' perspective, we want it to be the same. We want them to just see the service. We don't want to be saying to them, oh, we're really sorry that broke because supplier X didn't do what they were supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So yeah, as part of the SIAM ecosystem, it's having those quality checks, having that onboarding process for the service providers that join, and being able to scale. You can grow, you can shrink, you can remove a service provider who is not performing, and that should all be seamless from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, it's a bit like building some resilience into your organization.
Absolutely.
You can provide the same level of service or quality of service to your customers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. So a topic that we encounter a lot in these integration talks is about ITIL4. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're aware about ITIL4, and it's a lot about the value. ITIL4 is about the value it brings to customers, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you see that in combination with SIAM?
So SIAM's been around for more than 10 years now, so kind of, I guess, similar age to ITIL version 3. Mm-hmm. And in ITIL version 3, there was no mention of SIAM, but most SIAM ecosystems are built on the service management processes that we would all recognize. So incident management, problem, change, release. What's different in a SIAM environment is you are managing that across multiple service providers. So you would kind of start in a SIAM environment with your standard incident management, but then you're looking at how does this fit across all of the different service providers that are involved. ITIL4 now recognizes SIAM. So there's a little bit of content in one of the books that deals with SIAM. And the thing in ITIL4 that I think gels very nicely with SIAM is this shift from calling the processes just processes to recognizing them as practices, because the practice view in ITIL4 leverages the 4 dimensions that they've introduced as well. And one of those is suppliers and partners. So if you're an organization that's moving from ITIL v3 to ITIL4, one of the things you're going to look to do is try and take a more holistic view of your processes. And one of the things that's included in that now is thinking about all the different partners and suppliers that might be involved with that. So you can kind of see, as they've been updating ITIL, they've been looking around the industry to see, you know, what's happening, how a company's working, and they've clearly recognized that SIAM is something that's being widely adopted.
Yeah, okay, all right. Isn't that like, because terminology and it's really important, so knowing that everyone understands incident in the same way, it's really important. So is that one of the practices in SIAM to say, well, please work with a company that's also implementing ITIL4 or ITIL3? Or is that not a practice?
Ask me that again. I didn't quite understand the question there.
Clear in my question. So the question is more about if you want to start to cooperate with a vendor, I am going to prescribe things like the way that this vendor works.
I see.
And provide customer services.
I see. No, it doesn't. And it's one of the benefits of SIAM is that really vendors can kind of do their own thing as long as they're fitting in with the overall SIAM model. So whilst most SIAM ecosystems are generally built using, I guess we'd say, service management processes, it's not necessarily, you know, 100% aligned with ITIL, but service management processes, you could have, for example, a software vendor that's completely focused on agile development. And as long as they were sharing the information back into the SIAM model, as long as they were collaborating and communicating, it's not part of the role of the service integrator to say, you must follow this process. What the service integrator will be saying is, we need you to collaborate with this forum. We need you to identify improvement opportunities in this way. We need this section of your report, because that then fits into the overall end-to-end service reporting. So within a SIAM ecosystem, you could have service providers who are working with, you know, ITIL v3, ITIL4, Agile, DevOps, whatever it might be. It should all fit seamlessly together.
All right. So how do you get started with SIAM? So I got a couple of vendors. How do we get started? How does that work?
The first thing to do is to think about, is this something we need? So, you know, you've said you've got a couple of vendors, maybe you've seen some problems with end-to-end service or getting the information you need or getting things fixed. So you've kind of identified that you've got a bit of a requirement there. You then need to understand what you actually have in place, because there's an awful lot of organizations who have a very poor understanding of who do we have contracts with, what do those contracts look like, who's holding the contract, when does it expire. So a bit of a current state assessment, which is beneficial for any organization. And then kind of depends on your size as an organization and also what you're hoping to do in the future. If you're kind of fairly small, you've got a small number of service providers, you're not necessarily going to be going out to the market and asking for an external service integrator to come in, but you can start to adopt some of the practices from the SIAM body of knowledge. So you might think, well, I'm going to introduce some governance forums. So I'm going to ask my suppliers to get together and meet with me, and we're going to chat about where we might improve the end-to-end service. Or you might want to start in the measurements and metrics space and say, I'd really like to get a grip on the end-to-end service and kind of see where things could get better. So it is really about understanding where you are right now, what problems you've got, and then where that kind of service integration focus can start to deliver improvements. And, you know, many organizations initially will be focused on the reactive things, but the idea is as you improve, you're building this culture of collaboration between the suppliers that you're working with, the different service providers. And actually then they might start to think, hey, you know, we could work together and we could actually do this much better for you. So you start to see more proactive improvements coming through as well.
Between the service providers, they start to work together to provide better service for like shared customers, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, imagine if two of your service providers came to you and said, look, we've been working on this together and this can save you money or it can do this faster for you. You'd be absolutely delighted. They're happy as well. You're more likely to kind of continue in business with them. They're getting more business. It's a really nice kind of virtuous cycle that you get into.
Yeah, it's a better offering for a customer, of course, and also for the supplier. It's a better way of cooperating and keeping that customer a customer.
Yeah. It's kind of a really old school way of supplier management is this, you know, we've got a contract and you didn't meet your targets, so we're going to charge you for it this month. You're not getting the best service back from that supplier then, because all they will be thinking about is how do I avoid getting charged penalties next month. So if it becomes much more of a relationship, if your suppliers know that you see the big picture, that you're giving them almost space to experiment, then you do get that better relationship. And certainly I've always found in my experience, but that, you know, by the time you reach the point where you're saying, I think you'll find on page 12, section 3, clause 2.1, it says blah, 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 that relationship's pretty much dead anyway. You know, it's not a good place to be.
Yeah, that's what they say. Contract is for the end, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But from your experience, when do you reach really the objectives of the SIAM project, and how long does it take to get there?
So we've done for the last 3 years, we've done a global SIAM survey, and if people are kind of interested in some of these stats, they can have a look on the Scopism website. They're all in our free download section. But really, the sort of the true SIAM implementations tend to be in the very large organizations, and you are looking sort of a year to 18 months to get this set up, to get the contract changes in place, to get the suppliers onboarded. It's not something to be undertaken lightly. I mean, for smaller organizations, there's absolutely lots of things you can do in terms of bringing in a more sort of SIAM culture, but the people that we're asking in the survey tend to be the really big organizations, and they are looking at kind of a year to 18 months. And it's kind of worth mentioning as well, because initially SIAM is not necessarily going to be something that saves money. There's an investment that's required up front for setting up a SIAM ecosystem as well, whether you're using internal or external resources to act as the service integrator. There is still kind of a big project, a big transformation to be done before you start to see those benefits. It's not something you'll have done by the end of next week. But of course, as soon as you start on that journey, you will start to see the benefits coming through.
Yeah, okay. And does it require a lot of maintenance, meaning that from your experience, if the environment has been set up correctly, you can go on for it a lot? Or do you need to make a lot of modifications in the way that you cooperate with your suppliers?
Some of it is going to depend on how much change you have within your supplier network. So if you've constantly got new suppliers coming on or old suppliers leaving, then there will be much more maintenance. But really it's culture, and you know, culture does require constant tweaking, constant improvement. We have in the SIAM professional body of knowledge, we have this concept of levels of trust changing over time. So we talk about the fact that when you bring a new service provider into the model, the trust might be quite low because you don't know them, they've not proven themselves. Over time, that level of trust increases. So you do less hands-on management with that particular service provider, but then maybe the key contact changes. So the trust drops a little bit, then it climbs, then you have a major incident and the trust might go down to the floor for a little bit. So some of it will be, context driven, but it does always require that constant grooming of the relationships.
Yeah, of course, because the world is changing, companies are changing, and that will have an impact on the providers that you're working with, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So so you've been mentioning the body of knowledge of SIAM. Can you tell a bit about how it was established and the background of it?
Yeah, sure. So when I set up Scopism a few years ago, I could see the service management world was changing, and one of the kind of the focus areas was to create content to help service management professionals. And looking across the service management world, I could see that SIAM had a lot of popularity, there was a lot of interest in it, but there was nothing written down. It wasn't like ITIL where you can just go buy the books and kind of get going. The thing with SIAM is it had started in the industry. So some of it came through government departments, and it was the big service providers who'd really developed the concepts and created a product to sell in effect. So of course, if you're Accenture or Tata Consultancy, it's not necessarily in your interest to write all your secrets down and make them publicly available. So what I wanted to do was create something so that if you're interested in SIAM, you can go learn about it and find out, is this relevant for my organization? How do I get started? So we pulled together a group of volunteers, and one of the things that was really lovely was actually how willing all those big organizations were to get involved and share some of their secrets. So we did have companies like Atos, Capgemini, Tata Consultancy contributing. We had public sector, private sector, global contributors. And really the job of the author team was to try and get some agreed concepts. So terms, definitions, roles, practices, benefits, challenges. And we worked as a group, we kind of worked really hard. Some quite lively discussions, I think we would say, on the conference calls that we had, where people had kind of different experiences. But we created first the foundation body of knowledge, which then became also the basis for the SIAM Foundation certification that's available. And then we wrote the professional body of knowledge, which is a more advanced book. It's more aimed at practitioners, the people who will actually be doing it. And both of those are available for free via the Scopism website. So if you want to read more about SIAM, if you want to learn, go to scopism.com, find the free download section, and they're in there, because it was very important to me that, those books have been written by volunteers. So it's not something I can make money from, but also the more freely available that information is, the better it is for the SIAM industry, because the more people can access it, the more those concepts will get shared, and then the more the community grows. So it's always, I think when we first met, you're reading the SIAM body of knowledge, and it's just such a little thrill for me when I meet people all over the world and they say, look, we've got your book.
So what's Scopism coming from? What's the name standing for?
Scopism is, some of it is that whole thing where you're thinking, I'm starting a new business. What domain names are available? But we spent a long time thinking about, vision, looking to the future, trying to put a lens on things. So some of it's from that kind of telescope perspective. Some of it's about scope in general, and really we just decided that we quite liked that one. My husband and I, as he's a director at Scopism as well, we spent quite a long time going through various different things, and then when we hit on Scopism, we decided, yeah, we like that.
That's the one. The domain name is available. Let's go.
Yep, that's it. Nobody's trademarked it, it's ours.
Okay. So you mentioned the SIAM Foundation certification. What's that? Could you tell about what the certification just takes?
Yep. So again, this is part, I guess, of SIAM becoming more formally adopted and codified and shareable. So once we'd written the foundation body of knowledge, we started to work with a Dutch certification company called EXIN, who have a lot of experience in the service management space, very well respected. We know that they kind of have a real focus on quality. So we have an agreement with EXIN to be the examination institute for SIAM. And what EXIN did was to take the foundation body of knowledge and develop a syllabus that's associated with it, and then develop exams as well. And then that becomes available to training providers all over the world. They can develop training. And for anybody who's watching who's taken an ITIL foundation course, it's kind of a similar to that one, it's similar level, getting you that basic grounding, that basic understanding, 2 to 3 days of training, or there's online versions available as well. And it just gives you that kind of first step in your SIAM career. And there's been SIAM exams taken in more than 40 countries now. So it's really good to see that adoption all over the world.
Are there a lot of people who are certified?
Yeah, there are. I don't have the exact number, but there's tens of thousands of people who are now SIAM certified. And I think, again, it's similar to how ITIL used to be. It's not a huge percentage of them that go on to take the SIAM professional, but there is that kind of more advanced training and certification that people can take as well. And, the feedback that I hear is that SIAM professional is tough. People are really, really proud when they've passed that exam. So it's a good one to have out there.
Do you need to have any technical background? Do you need to be a computer scientist?
No, you don't. So you don't need, for the foundation level, really, some IT exposure is helpful, but you don't need any prerequisites for that. For the SIAM professional, if you have some experience in an IT environment, that is going to be helpful. But again, the bodies of knowledge are so comprehensive, you can, in theory, use that for your preparation. But I think, again, my experience is, you always get more out of training when you can put it into context a little bit, I think, and start to think about, how will I apply this in my role?
So some it might be a misconception, but SIAM is a bit seen as IT services related. But services are, of course, much wider. So could you talk about that? What's the scope of SIAM on its own?
So SIAM originated in the IT space, and it came from the fact that all these IT services that we have tend to have these horrendously complex supply chains. And when we've done the global SIAM survey, we do ask the question, does your SIAM model include just IT services, IT and non-IT services, or just non-IT services? And I think kind of 98%-ish are just applying it to IT services. So I would say it's a fair observation that it's very much within the IT space at the moment. But like you say, as digital transformation accelerates, as we shift to a more enterprise service management approach, I think by kind of natural evolution that the SIAM model is going to expand. Because the ideas behind SIAM are very, very simple. I just think sometimes in IT we like putting really complicated names on things. So perhaps the whole service integration and management frightens people off a little bit in the business side of things. That might be part of the issue, but definitely the benefits would be the same. And we didn't manage to get it into the book in the end, but one of the SIAM authors was talking about he'd used the SIAM model in local government for their parks and gardens. So as part of maintaining parks and gardens, they had the people cutting the lawn, fixing the play equipment, all of the different people that were involved. And they were treating that like a SIAM model. So absolutely it's possible. It's just not very common at the moment.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I can see that there's potential to expand into total different types of services, including
Definitely.
park services. Yeah. Now, interesting. So, if I would like to have more information on SIAM, and so what do you advise? Are there any events to go to, or virtually, of course, but
yes. So definitely visit the Scopism website. There's all the free downloads on there, and you'll also see on our events page, we do have our SIAM conference coming up in April this year. So we've run that for the last 3 years as a face-to-face event. So we've had delegates from all over Europe who've attended, and one gentleman who came from India all the way to the UK for the conference.
okay.
This year we have to be virtual, but we're taking that as an opportunity for it to be a much more global event. So we've got speakers from India, China, Japan, Australia, Denmark, Netherlands. We've got a real mix of speakers, all kind of sharing their SIAM stories and their SIAM expertise. And thanks to our kind of very generous sponsors that we've got, the ticket price is just £20 as well. So it's a very small investment for a lot of good quality content.
All right. Yeah, £20 should be feasible, right?
It's not a big amount.
No, it is. Well, interesting. I learned a lot on SIAM today. So, okay. Thank you, Claire, about the introduction. I'm sure there's much more. I'm inviting all our listeners to ask questions and to see how SIAM can work for them. And I'm sure with Claire on the steering wheel, I'm sure that a lot of this information can be provided.
Thanks very much for the invitation.
Yeah, all right. Thank you.